Hi, my name is Jody Guerra. I'm with Excelsior Classes, and this is Book Banter, a video blog or vlog in which we tell you what you should be reading next. And for this edition, we are calling this Memoirs That Will Make You Cry. And I'm telling you, these are some gut-wrenching, heart-rending stories, so you will want to grab your box of Kleenex while you're reading any of these books. In fact, most of these books deal with very mature themes, and so I'm primarily really speaking to young adults and adults for these works. And if you're a parent, I would suggest that you read the book first to see if the content is something that you feel that your student should or could handle. Many of these stories are deal with some with either violence or sexual abuse or war themes, and so you need to know what's best for your student. But I think all of them are poignant and heartfelt, and I think what these works do is connect us. You know, a lot of people talk about the way that literature helps, our stories help to connect us with others, especially those with whom we doesn't appear to have any shared experience with the other person. And I think all of these books say something pretty important. The first one I want to recommend is called Night, and it's by Elie Wiesel. He is a Nobel Peace Prize winner who's won the Congressional Medal of Honor. He is a Holocaust survivor, having been in both Auschwitz and Buchenwald. He died in 2016, so not all that long ago, but he was a very observant Jewish teenager who was taken from his home in Transylvania, and that was, I think, in 1944. And this book it's just, if you look at the Diary of Anne Frank, and a lot of there's a lot of tension in that book, but most of the tension in the book is what will happen if we're discovered, and all of the horror of what happens after they are discovered is not discussed. Well, think of this as all of the horror that they go through, you know, that concentration camp victims are living through and put through. And so this particular book is one that is a difficult read, but I think it is a very important read. This book was originally published in French and has been translated. I do believe that the edition that I have is one that was translated by his wife. Yes, it is. And it's an important book to read. It really is, but it is gut-wrenching. Another one that I think is possibly, you know, pretty appropriate for high schoolers to read, although it does deal quite substantially with the horrors of war, and it's this book. It's called A Long Way Gone, and it is by Ishmael Bea, and the subtitle of it is Memoirs of a Boy Soldier. So little Ishmael, at the age of 12, is separated from his parents in Sierra Leone, and then ends up falling into the hands of rebels and warlords in that country. He loses his family, he loses friends, and it is only through a series of interactions with UNICEF and some other very important agencies doing work in that part of the world that he escapes this cycle of violence. And we have his account here. I have read this book with a group of teens before, and while it is horrifying and horrible, it does shed a great deal of light on this issue of what is happening to children in war-torn countries as they are recruited to, or really recruited is not the right word, forced to fight in these battles, being plied with drugs and alcohol, and it's just a very sad and horrifying situation. And so I think this is one of those books that really opens up students' eyes to the blessings of living in our country, as well as the need for many of us to be a voice for what is happening in other places. it's a very evocative work that calls forth, I think, the best of our compassion when you're reading it. So I highly recommend it. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to some books that I think are a little bit, the next one's a bit edgy. I would say parental guidance would be suggested. The final two, I think that students are not, it's not appropriate for students. But this one, and this is one of my favorite books of all time, and it's called Angela's Ashes. It's by Frank McCourt. And you can see I had to check this one out from the library. Several of these, I've lent my book out to people, and then I don't get them back. That's how good these books are. But this particular work by Frank McCourt won the Pulitzer Prize. It is 100 times better than the movie. Don't watch the movie. This book, there is no way for a cinematic film to capture really the poignancy of this story. So Frank McCourt, let me just read, if you'll bear with me, I just would like to read the very first part of the book. It's just 2 paragraphs. My father and mother should have stayed in New York where they met and married and where I was born. Instead, they returned to Ireland when I was 4, my brother Malachi 3, the twins Oliver and Eugene barely 1, and my sister Margaret dead and gone. When I look back on my childhood, I wonder how I survived it all. It was, of course, a miserable childhood. The happy childhood is hardly worth your time. Worse than the ordinary miserable childhood is the miserable Irish childhood, and worse yet is the miserable Irish Catholic childhood. He had me at that very beginning. I couldn't put this book down, and on every page, it is just a marvel and a wonder. The poverty, I mean, soul-crushing poverty, death, alcoholism, breaking up of families. The list goes on and on for what Frank McCourt and his family go through. I will say that this is probably one of the few books, this is the next one I'll discuss, in which I am laughing and crying all at the same time. And I read an interview of this author, and he said that he knew he had something in him, you know, this story that he wanted to tell, but he didn't quite, he knew that he just couldn't because it was so overwhelmingly despairing. But when he realized if he told the story as it happened, like through a childhood narrator, then it was palpable, then it was bearable, you know. And so the story told through the eyes of this child, it becomes something that's hilarious and sad and wonderful all at the same time. I have to say, it's probably one of my top 5 books of all time. I love it. It really is a wonder. Okay, so another horrible childhood book. The last of these are these horrible childhoods, which I guess because I had such a sheltered and wonderful childhood, these books are just revelations to me. And this one, again, I had to check out from the library, but it is by Mary Karr, and it is called The Liars Club. This was published, I want to say, back in 96, I believe. No, 95. And this is also an award-winning Penn Faulkner Book Award, I believe. It was on the New York Times bestseller for well over a year. And Mary Karr, you know, is from Texas. She grew up in kind of like a outpost or a suburb in the East Texas Gulf Coast, kind of around Beaumont, high refinery, oil refining kind of places over there. And this book is also about a childhood of just utter poverty, chaos, violence, sexual abuse. It is a difficult read. I will tell you, it's a difficult read, but there are parts of the story that are just hilarious. It's just, I think it's the way that people get through their lives. You know, that saying that if you don't laugh, you're going to cry, and you just can't move on. And so this is another one of these books. It was just a revelation, and Mary Karr is now known as one of the top memoirists of our time. She does teach writing. and it is very well known. She has a series. I think there's 2 or 3 other memoirs, but this first one was just so eye-opening and like a bolt of lightning, really. So this is another one, again, not recommended for kids. And my final one, also not recommended for kids. It is called The Boy Kings of Texas. And this one is by Domingo Martinez. And I know you're seeing this Texas theme here. This book is a revelation because if you live in Texas, you know that there are just different parts of Texas, and they are very disparate, and they're not the same. And so Domingo Martinez, it grows up in the valley, down in the Rio Grande Valley, in a border town in the late 80s or 1980s. And this cast of characters is unlike any that you will see in any other book, because you can only find this cast of characters down in the Texas Valley that's bordering Mexico. That's the only place that you could find this story. You've got his grandmother who hoards guns and takes out life insurance policy on all the young men because she knows they're going to be dead. The 2 Mimis who are his older sisters, and they're just delightful. It's a harsh reality book. It really is. This book also was a finalist for the National Book Award. It won a Pushcart Prize, or it was a Pushcart Prize nominee when it was, a portion of it was excerpted. It's an enlightening book. It's a fun book, but it is really dealing with some adult themes, and it's just very eye-opening. I think that's the reason I love memoirs so much, just how eye-opening and how just the survival of the human spirit makes me glad and happy for my own childhood. I'm thankful for the Lord for seeing all of us through our lives, and I think that these stories are just great ways to connect with others. I hope that you'll, in the comments, write maybe some of your favorite memoirs that you've read, and if you read any of these, let me know what you think, okay? Until next time, happy reading.